Hello, this is Mr. Stansbury. I'm going to take you through the 8E assignment. Okay, so the first one we got here is number 2, solve for x. So this is a little different than the 8D because we actually have to, we're actually solving, figuring out what x is. Actually, it's got an equation in there. So let's start with A here. And we have x minus 2 squared equals 9. Okay, now the part that we want to get rid of over here with the x is let's get rid of that square. You could multiply this out, or simpler, nicer version is just take the square root of both sides to get rid of that square. And we're left with x minus 2. And then remember, when you square root a number, it's going to be plus or minus the square root of 9, which is 3. Okay, so we add 2 to both sides, and we get that x equals 2 plus or minus 3. So we actually have to do both. So really this means x equals 2 plus 3, and x could also equal 2 minus 3. So x is going to equal 5, and then x is also going to equal negative 1. So we can simply just write it as x equals 5 or negative 1. Okay, either one of those would work. All right. D, same exact idea. X minus 4 squared equals 2. Square root both sides to get rid of the root there, and we have x minus 4 equals, and then since this doesn't work out to be a perfect square, you can just leave it as plus or minus the square root of 2. Okay, so our last step is just to add 4. Add 4 to both sides, and we get that x equals 4 plus or minus root 2. And you can just leave it like that. You don't have to figure out what that decimal is. You can if you want, but you can just leave it as 4 plus or minus root 2. Okay? All right, G, 2x plus 5 squared equals 0. Square root both sides, and we get 2x plus 5 equals, the square root of 0 is just 0, plus or minus 0 is still just 0, so you don't have to put the plus minus on this one. Subtract 5 from both sides. 2x equals negative 5 divided by 2, and we get x equals negative 5 halves or negative 2 and a half. Either way is fine by me. Okay? All right, so let's move on to the next example. We've got number 1. Let's see, it says solve for x using the null factor law. All right, so we're just, basically the null factor law here is just, we know that x times x plus 3 has to equal 0. If you can get something to equal 0, and you have two or more things that are multiplied together, you know that if either one of these things equals 0, then you know that you're going to end up getting 0 at the end. So our answer will just be what makes this equal to 0. So we want to know when x equals 0, and we also want to know when x plus 3 equals 0. Okay? So x equals 0 when x is 0. And then if we just subtract 3 from both sides, we also get x equals negative 3. Okay? So those are our two possible answers for that one. All right? And again, if you want, you can always plug those back in and check and see if they work. Okay, and you will. 0 times any number will give us 0, and then negative 3 times negative 3 plus 3 is 0. That will also give us 0. Okay, so, back to D. We've got 4x times 2 minus x equals 0. So I simply just ask myself 4 times what will give me 0? And that's 0. Okay. Or 2 minus what will give me 0? 2 minus 2 will give us 0. Okay. All right. So we don't officially really need this apostrophe there, do we? It's just 0 or 2. Okay. Let's try G here. We've got 2x plus 1 times 2x minus 1, and they both equal, we have to get those to multiply together to get 0. Okay, So we know that 2x plus 1 can equal 0, or 2x minus 1 can equal 0. So we simply can just solve these. So let's subtract 1 from both sides. 2x equals negative 1 divided by 2. X equals negative 1/2, or add 1 to both sides. 2x equals 1 divided by 2, or x equals 1/2. Okay, so we get x equals negative 1/2 or positive 1/2. Okay, and then let's try the last one here. J x squared equals 0. So really simply enough, what times itself will give you 0? Just 0. Okay, x will equal 0. It's only one that'll work. All right, moving on to the next one. Our next number one, factorize and hence solve for x. So basically you're saying factor first and then solve this thing for x. So for a, we have 3x squared plus 6x equals 0. So let's see, we can factor a 3x out of both of these, right? So we get 3x times, that's going to leave us with x plus 2 equals 0. And this is just like the ones we were just doing earlier. So you say, okay, 3 times what gives me 0? 0. Or what minus 2 gives us 0? Negative 2 plus 2 gives us 0. Okay, so those are going to be our two answers for A. Okay, D, 4x squared equals 5x. I would suggest moving the 5x over here since they want us to factorize. So let's do that. Minus 5, subtract 5x from both sides. Oops, not squared, but just 5x. And we get 4x squared minus 5x equals 0. So we can get an x out of both of those. So that's going to be x times 4x minus 5 equals 0. So x can equal 0, or, and then we have 4x minus 5 equals 0, right? So let's see, we've got 4x minus 5 equals 0, add 5. 4x equals 5 divided by 4. X is 5/4 or 1.25. Okay. And then our last one on this one, F, 4x equals 8x squared. I'm going to move my 4x to the right side just so we can keep the leading coefficient positive. Doesn't matter. Either way will work just fine, but we get 0 equals 8x squared minus 4x. All right, what can we factor out of both of those? We can factor a 4 and an x out of both of those, right? So we get 4x times, that's going to leave us with 2x minus 1. So x can equal 4 times 0 is 0, or 2 times what minus 1 gives us 0. Really a fast way that I've figured out to do this, we know for sure this 1 here is going to get moved to the other side, so it's going to turn from from negative 1 to positive 1, and then we're always going to divide by whatever the x is with, so it's going to be 1/2 will be the other one. Okay, and if you don't like that, again, you can still do the 2x minus 1 equals 0, add 1, 2x equals 1, divide by 2, and look, there's your x equals 1/2, which is right there. Okay, all right, moving on to the next one. Number 2, solve for x. All right, so all we're really going to do here is try to factor these out. There's nothing you can factor out of all three of them, so we're going to have to factor this way. Okay, so what are the factors of 14 that add up to 9? Let's see, what is that going to be? 2 times 7 adds up to 9, right? So we got x and x, 2 and 7. They have to, these two numbers here have to add up to 9, so it's positive 2 and positive 7. So we want to know when this is going to equal 0. So we have to make this equal to 0 and this equal to 0. So x has to equal negative 2 plus 2 gives us 0. And negative 7 plus 7 gives us 0. So x equals -2 or -7. All right. D, we have x squared plus x equals 12. I'm going to move my 12 to the other side here so that we end up having this whole thing here, x squared plus x minus 12 equaling 0. So then we can factor this and figure out what will work for 0, what will work to make it multiply to get 0. So factors of 12 that have a difference of 1, because that's a 1x, right? So 12 is 1 times 12. That doesn't work. 2 times 6 doesn't work. 3 times 4 does work. So we got x and x, 3 and 4. It has to add up to positive 1, so it has to be positive 4, negative 3. That adds up to positive 1. So x will equal 3 minus 3 gives us 0, or negative 4 plus 4 gives us 0. So those are those two solutions there. All right. F, we got x squared plus 4 equals 4x. So I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. And to make my life easy on this one, I'm going to put x squared, and then I'm going to put my minus 4x, and then I'm going to put my plus 4. So now I can just go straight into this factoring piece that we do here. Okay. Factors of 4 that add up to 4 are going to be 2 and 2. Right? Because 2 plus 2 gives us 4. Now these have to add up to negative 4, so they're going to both be negative. So x will equal 2, because 2 minus 2 gives us 0. And then also over here is this exact same answer. 2 minus 2 gives us 0, so the only thing we're going to get there is just x equals 2 is going to be our only answer. Okay? Okay. Let's try the next example, or the next problem, number 3, solve for x. So this is similar to what we were just doing. 2x squared plus 2 equals 5x. I'm going to move my 5x over. We get 2x squared minus 5x plus 2 equals 0. Can't factor anything out of those. So now I'm going to go 2 times 2 gives me 4. I want to find the factors of 4, since it's a positive, that add up to 5, which are going to be 1 times 4 adds up to 5. Right? So I'm going to keep my 2x squared. I'm going to keep my 2. And then these have to add up to negative 5. So it has to be negative 1x and negative 4x. That adds up to negative 5. Okay? Regroup these. Put a plus in the middle and see what we can factor out of both of these. We can get x's out of both of those. We get x and we get, let's see, when we get that out there, we have 2x minus 1. And then this one, again, the first number here is a negative, so we got to factor a negative out of both of these, and we can get a 2 out of both of those. So it's negative 2 times 4x over negative 2 is positive 2x, and then 2 divided by negative 2 is minus 1 equals 0. So we factor the 2x minus 1 out of both of those, and we're left with x minus 2. All right? So x is going to equal, again, I know I'm going to take the opposite of this one here, positive 1 divided by 2, so 1/2, or let's see, 2 minus 2 gives us 0. So x equals 1/2 or 2 for A. All right. D, we get 2x squared plus 5x equals 3. Let's move the 3 to this side over here, and we get 2x squared plus 5x minus 3 equals 0. There's no common factors of any of those, so I'm just going to go 2 times negative 3 gives me negative 6. So I need to find the factors of 6 that have a difference of 5. So that's going to be 1 and 6 have a difference of 5. Okay. Now this one's the one that a lot of people will get hung up on. Since we got negative here, it has to be factors of 6 that have a difference of 5. A lot of people will say, oh, it's 2 and 3 because 2 plus 3 gives us 5. But since this sign here is negative, you have to subtract the two factors. Okay? So we have 2x squared, and then we have a negative 3 equals 0. These have to add up to positive 5, so it has to be negative 1x and plus 6x. Okay? Group those, put an addition sign between, and see what you can factor out of both of those. So we can only get an x out of the first one. That leaves us with 2x minus 1. And this one here, we can get a 3 out of both of these. So that's positive 3, and then that turns into 2x minus 1 equals 0. So we have 2x minus 1 times, and then our leftover pieces are x plus 3. That's what equals 0. So x equals, to make this equal to 0, take the opposite of this one here. So that's positive 1 divided by 2, or negative 3 plus 3 gives us 0. Okay? And then f here, we've got 2x squared plus 7x plus 5 equals 0. Nothing you can factor out of all of those. Let's go 2 times 5, which gives us 10. We want to find the factors of 10 that add up, since it's positive, to 7. So that's going to be 2 and 5, right? So we've got 2x squared. We got a plus 5 over here. And then let's see, they have to add up to positive 7. So let's do plus 2x plus 5x. And then we're going to group them and add them together. Okay? Find the common factors of both sets here, and we can factor 2x out of both of these. So that leaves us with x, and then 2x over 2x reduces down to 1. And then we can get a 5 out of both of these. So that's plus 5, and that leaves us with x plus 1 here equals 0. So we officially factor the x plus 1 out of both of those, and we're left with 2x plus 5 equals 0. So x can equal negative 1 plus 1 gives us 0, and then the opposite of 5 is negative 5 divided by 2. Okay, so, and you know what, you can just leave it like that, or you could write it as x equals negative 1 or negative 2.5. Either one of those is fine. This one's probably a little bit nicer, but those both work. Okay? All right. Moving on to number 4. All right. Solve for x. So, a, we have 6x squared plus 13x equals 5. Let's move the 5 to this side over here. 6x squared plus 13x minus 5 equals 0. Nothing that we can get out of all those, so we got to multiply 6 times negative 5 equals negative 30. So I want to find the factors of 30 that have a difference of 13. So 1 times 30 doesn't work, but 15 and 2 do have a difference of 13. So we're going to rewrite this as 6x squared and negative 5. The first and the last always stay. And then these two have to add up to 13, so that's going to be plus 15x and minus 2x. Okay? Group the first two and the last two, and then add them together, and see what you can factor out of both of them. So we can get a 3x out of both of these. So we get 3x, let's see, that leaves us with 2x. And then 15 divided by 3 gives us 5. Right? This leading number here is negative, so we got to factor a negative for sure out of both of those. 2 and 5 don't have anything in common, so we're really just going to factor a negative 1 out. So that's going to turn the negative 2x into positive 2x, and the negative 5 into positive 5 equals 0. Okay? Factor the 2x plus 5 out, and we're left with 3x minus 1 equals 0. So x is going to have to equal, opposite of 5 is negative 5, divided by 2, or opposite of 1 is positive 1 over 3. Okay? All right, let's take a look at D here. So we've got, let's see, 21x squared equals 62x plus 3. I always like working with my leading coefficient to be positive. It just makes this a lot easier, so I'm always going to move it so that that's positive. So let's subtract 62x and subtract 3 from both sides. Okay, so we get, excuse me, 21x squared minus 62x minus 3 equals 0. These don't have any common factors. It's close, but we can't quite get a 3 out of all of them. So now we just multiply. 21 times negative 3 gives us negative 63. So this one could be a little tricky because we got to find the factors of 63 that have a difference of 62. Okay, we kind of lucked out here because that's got to be 63 and 1 have to be our factors, right? Because those are the only ones that have a difference of 62. So we have 21x squared, and we have our negative 3. And then these have to add together to get negative 62, so it's got to be negative 63x plus 1x. Okay, and then we group the first and the second and add them together and see what kind of common factors they'll both have. Let's see, we can actually get a 21 and an x out of both of these. Right, so that's going to leave us with 21x, and that's going to leave us with x minus 3. And then this one here, there's nothing you can get out of both of those, so we'll just say we're going to divide them both by positive 1. So we put plus 1 times, and then we have x minus 3 equals 0. So we end up getting x minus 3 times 21x plus 1 equals 0. So x has to equal 3 minus 3. 3 minus 3 gives us 0. Or opposite of 1 is negative 1 divided by 21. Those will work. Okay? All right. Let's take a look at F here. 10x squared equals 7x plus 3. So I'm going to move them both to the left side so that our leading coefficient is positive. So I'm going to subtract 7x and 3. Right? And we get 10x squared minus 7x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, can't factor anything out of all of those, so I'm going to go 10 times negative 3 is negative 30. So we got to come up with the factors of 30 that have a difference of 7. So what's that going to be? That's going to be what? 10 and 3 are going to be the factors that have a difference of 7. So we'll write that as 10x squared, and we got our negative 3. And then these have to add up to negative 7, so it's going to be negative 10x and positive 3x. Okay. Group these and add them together. Find out what common factors they both have. This is going to be 10x. Sorry, we can get a factor of 10x out of both of these. So we get 10x times x minus 1. And then over here, we can get a 3 out of both of those. So that's positive 3, so plus 3. And that's going to be x minus 1 here also. So we factor the x minus 1 out of both of these, and we're left with 10x plus 3. Okay? So x has to equal 1 minus 1 is 0, or opposite of 3 is negative 3 over 10. Okay? Okay, a couple more a couple more problems to do, and we're good to go. Okay, number 5. Solve for x by first expanding brackets and then equating to 0. Okay, so let's try that out. So let's distribute this x to both of those and this 2 to both of those, and then we'll just simplify and solve it. So that gives us x squared plus 5x. Let's see, plus 2x plus 12 equals 0. So that's going to give us x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0. All right? So now we can just factor it out. Factors of 12 that add up to 7 are going to be, let's see, the factors of 12. 1 times 12 doesn't work. 2 times 6 does not add up to 7, but 3 times 4 works. So we got 3 and 4. They have to add up to positive 7, so it's positive 3 and positive 4. So, again, since it's equal 0, you got to figure out what x equals. So x has to either equal negative 3 or negative 4. Right? Because if you plug in negative 3 to this, that will give you 0. 0 times anything will give you 0. If you plug in negative 4 to this one, negative 4 plus 4 is 0, and 0 times anything will give us 0. All right? All right. Let's try this one. Distribute those to both of these. And it equals 17, so we'll have to move that 17 over too. Anyway, 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 2 is 6x. Now make sure you don't forget the negative out here. So it's negative 5 times x is negative 5x, and negative 5 times negative 3 is positive 15 equals 17. Okay? So, simplifying, that gives us 3x squared. 6x minus 5x is plus 1x plus 15 equals 17. We now want to move the 17 over so we get this side over here equal to 0. So that'll be much nicer for us to factor and solve. So we get 3x squared plus x minus 2 equals 0. Can't factor anything out of all of those, so let's go 3 times negative 2. It's negative 6. Factors of 6 that have a difference of 1 are going to be 2 and 3, right? So we'll have 3x squared and negative 2. And then these have to add up to positive x, so it's going to be negative 2x plus 3x. And this all equals 0. So group the first two and the last two and find common factors. Okay, on this left side over here, we just have a common factor of x, so that's x, and we're left with 3x, and over here minus 2. And then this one here, there are no common factors, so really we're officially just factoring out a plus 1. So we do plus 1 times 3x minus 2 equals 0. Those two match, so we get 3x minus 2, and those are gone, and we're left with x plus 1. So x has to equal, opposite of negative 2 is positive 2 divided by 3, right? Or negative 1 plus 1 gives us 0. Okay, so we get 2/3 or negative 1 for D. All right, and then let's try F. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 6 is negative 12x equals x minus 20. Let's move the x and negative 20 to the other side. So let's subtract x and add 20. Subtract x and add 20. And that gives us 2x squared minus 13x plus 20. All right, equals 0. There's nothing to factor out of all of those, so 2 times 20 gives us 40. We've got to find the factors of 40 that add up to 13. So let's see, we could go 4 times 10, but that doesn't work. That adds up to 14. So let's do 5 and 8, right? 5 times 8 adds up to 13, so that should work. So we have 2x squared and plus 20 equals 0, and then these have to add up to negative 13, so they're going to be negative 5x and negative 8x. Group the first two and the last two and factor. You can get an x out of both of these. We're left with 2x minus 5, And over here we got to get the negative out. So let's see, 8 and 20 both have a 4 in common, right? So factor a negative 4 out of both of those, and you get negative 4 times, let's see, that's 2x, and 20 divided by negative 4 is negative 5, equals 0. So that's going to be, we factor the 2x minus 5 out, and we're left with x minus 4 equals 0. So x is going to have to equal, opposite of negative 5 is positive 5 divided by 2. And then 4 minus 4 gives us 0. Okay, so we get 5 halves or 4. Okay, last one. Solve for x by first eliminating the algebraic functions. Okay, really on these, whenever you see a fraction equals another fraction, or even a fraction equals a whole number, just set it up so that it's two different fractions, and then I'm just going to do cross product. So I know 3 times 2 has to equal x times x. So x times x has to equal 3 times 2, so that's x squared equals 6. I'm going to square root both sides and get x equals plus or minus root 6. Okay, and that's all you got to do for that one. Okay, this one here, 3 times 4 is going to equal x times x minus 1. So 3 times 4 equals x times x minus 1. And since people always ask which one do you put on the left, which one do you put on the right, since we're setting them equal to each other, it doesn't matter which one goes on the left and which one goes on the right. It's whatever you want to do. Either way, it'll work out just fine. Okay, so 3 times 4 is 12. Distribute this x through, and we get x squared minus x. Let's move the 12 over here to the right side. So we get 0 on one side. So we get 0 equals x squared minus x minus 12. Right? And then, oops, now we can factor this thing. Okay? Since the leading coefficient is 1, we can do the little backwards technique. Factors of 12 that have a difference of 1 are 3 and 4. Right? We know those are x and x. They have to add up to negative 1, so it's got to be negative 4 and positive 3. So x has to equal negative 3 plus 3 is 0, or positive 4 minus 4 gives us 0. Okay? Last one, cross products. X times x is going to equal 1 times x plus 2. So that gives us x squared equals x plus 2. So I'm going to move my x and my 2 to the left side here. So we get x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. And now we're just going to factor here. Factors of 2, only factors of 2 that I know of are 1 and 2. Well, whole number factors anyway. And then those have got to be x and x. And then it has to add up to negative 1. So it's got to be negative 2 plus 1. So x has to equal negative 1 plus 1 gives us 0. Or positive 2 minus 2 gives us 0. Okay? That's all there is for the 8E assignment. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in class. Thanks.